This is the brief on the Philippine Anti-Red Tape Act. We're looking at Philippine laws, specifically RA 9485 and RA 1132, designed to totally overhaul slow government services, crush red tape, and protect us from corrupt fixers. Your time is super valuable, and these laws actually force the government to respect it. First, there's a massive push for transparency through the Citizens Charter. Every government office must post a public billboard right at their entrance, detailing the exact steps, requirements, fees, and processing times for any service. It's kind of like a fast food menu. You know exactly what you're getting with absolutely no secret steps or hidden fees. Now, transparency is great, but it doesn't mean much if the line just isn't moving, right? So, second, the law enforces strict speed limits on bureaucracy. Simple transactions got to be done in 5 working days and complex ones in 10. And hey, have you ever felt totally trapped waiting on a single signature? Well, these laws literally cap the pen pushing to a maximum of just 5 signatures per document. Plus, there's this ultimate fail-safe. If the government misses a renewal deadline, your permit is automatically extended. So what happens if an agency just ignores these new speedy rules? Finally, let's talk accountability. Because this law really shows its teeth. Government workers face suspension and outright dismissal just for stalling applications. But the absolute harshest penalties target fixers, those people illegally charging you to cut the line, who now face up to 6 years in prison and 200,000 peso fines. Ultimately, these laws transform sluggish bureaucracies into streamlined, accountable systems where your time actually matters.
All right, let's talk about something that I'm pretty sure drives a lot of us crazy. Bureaucratic red tape. Today, we're going to break down the powerful law that's designed to slice right through it, and more importantly, what it means for you. I mean, we've all been there, right? You walk into a government office, you've got all your papers, you've taken time off work, and you just hit a wall. A wall of long lines, confusing instructions, and that sinking feeling of just being stuck. It's that combination of endless waiting, the requirements that seem to change depending on who you talk to, and the feeling that your day is just disappearing. Well, that exact shared frustration is what a very important law is meant to fix. Okay, so let's get into the solution. We're talking about the Anti-Red Tape Act. And here it is. Back in 2007, Republic Act 9485 was officially signed into law. And this wasn't just some internal memo or a guideline, this was a full-blown law, putting the fight against inefficiency on the books for good. It was designed to completely change the game for how government offices serve us, the public. And the law doesn't mess around. It states its mission right up front, loud and clear. It's all about making things more transparent, simplifying the crazy procedures, all with one big goal: to reduce red tape and expedite transactions. It's a straight-up command to every single government agency. So how does the law actually pull this off? Well, it gives us, the citizens, a really powerful tool. It's called the Citizens Charter. The best way to think about it is like a menu at a restaurant, right? Before you even order, you know exactly what they have, what it costs, and maybe even how long it takes to cook. The Citizens Charter is basically that, but for government services. It's their official promise to you, written in plain language. And here's the most important part. Every single government office is required by law to post this charter where everyone can see it. It has to spell out the whole deal, the exact steps you need to take, who's in charge of each step, the absolute maximum time the whole thing should take, every single document you need, and the precise fees. No more surprise requirements, no more guesswork. And this is a perfect example of what one looks like in the wild. This is from a city's business permit office. On the left, you've got the complete checklist of what you need to bring. And on the right, look at that, the step-by-step process with clear time limits for every single stage. That's what transparency looks like. So that idea of a clear promise, the menu, leads us right into the next big thing: putting the government on a clock. The law actually sets deadlines for every transaction. And these deadlines are not suggestions. For simple transactions, the straightforward stuff that doesn't need a lot of debate, they have 5 working days to get it done. For more complex things that might require some real evaluation, they get 10 working days max. Suddenly, the clock is ticking for them, not just for you. Now check this out. This is one of the best protections in the whole law. If a government office just doesn't act on your application to renew a permit or a license in time, it's considered automatically extended. Their inaction actually has a consequence that helps you out. Okay, so you've got the menu, you've got the clock, but what happens if an agency just ignores all of it? Well, this law has some serious teeth. One of the biggest things this law goes after is corruption, and it does that by specifically defining and targeting the fixer. We all know the type, right? Someone either working there or just hanging around outside who offers to speed things up for some extra cash. The law sees this for what it is, a crime that poisons the whole system. And the penalties? There are no joke. Under this law, a fixer who gets caught and convicted can face a fine of up to 200,000 pesos. And that's on top of possible jail time. It just shows you how seriously this kind of corruption is taken. But it's not just about the fixers. Government officials themselves can get in huge trouble for things like flat out refusing to accept your application, even if it's complete, failing to do their job within the deadline, or, and this is a big one, asking you for extra documents that aren't even on their own citizen's charter. To make sure all of this actually works, the law created this really smart feedback loop called a report card survey. This is your chance to rate the agency, to say what they did right and what they did wrong. It even asks you about hidden costs, like bribes, to help root out corruption. So you see, this law isn't just some dusty document in a library. It has evolved over time, and understanding it, really getting it, is your key to cutting through the nonsense and demanding the service you deserve. The 2007 law laid a fantastic foundation, but after about a decade, it became clear it needed an upgrade. So in 2018, the Ease of Doing Business Act came along and gave the original law even more power. It slashed the timelines down to 3, 7, and 20 days, and it even created a brand new agency, the Anti-Red Tape Authority, to act as a dedicated watchdog. The fight for efficiency never stops. So here's your game plan for the next time you have to go to a government office. Step 1. The minute you walk in, look for that citizen's charter. Step 2. Find your transaction and check the timeline. Know your deadline. Step 3, politely ask for the name of the person who's helping you. And step 4, when you're done, give feedback. By doing these simple things, you're not just helping yourself, you're helping keep the whole system honest. Because that's what it all comes down to. Knowing your rights under this law, knowing there's a menu, there's a clock, and there are real consequences for breaking the rules, empowers you. It gives you the confidence to demand efficient, transparent, and accountable service. The red tape is still out there, but now you've got the scissors.
You are standing in a room, and the fluorescent lights have that, that specific, slightly maddening hum to them.
Oh, yeah. I know exactly the sound you mean.
Right. And you are holding this plastic, clear book that is just stuffed with the artifacts of your entire existence.
Like birth certificates, tax records, all that.
Exactly. Photocopies of your ID, front and back, neatly clicked together. You've been shifting your weight on this hard linoleum floor for, what, 2 hours?
At least 2 hours.
Yeah, and you're just watching this digital red number on the wall, just praying it ticks over to your number.
It's a universal experience, really.
It totally is. And as you're watching, the clock right beside that red number ticks past 11:59 a.m., and boom, it hits 12:00 p.m.
Oh, no, I can feel the dread already.
Yep. The person behind the glass counter stands up, places a little plastic sign on the desk that says, "Next window," turns off their microphone, and just walks away.
The dreaded government office lunch hour.
You are trapped. You're frustrated, you're stuck, and you are just wondering why the system is so incredibly, painfully slow.
It's really the ultimate feeling of powerlessness, isn't it?
It really is.
You're at the mercy of this machine that just operates on its own timeline, with its own completely opaque set of rules.
Yeah, the person behind the glass basically holds all the cards.
Exactly. I mean, if they say wait, you wait. If they say come back tomorrow, you come back tomorrow. We sort of just accept this bureaucratic friction as like a law of nature.
Right, like bad weather or traffic. You just deal with it.
But what if a government actually looked at that exact frustration, that specific feeling of staring at an empty chair at noon, and decided to, well, make it illegal?
Make the lunch break excuse illegal. That sounds amazing.
It does. Yeah. Well, today's deep dive is the ultimate exploration into how a government legally mandates a cure for that exact bureaucratic pain.
We are looking at a literal blueprint for how a bureaucracy attempts to forcefully re-engineer its own DNA, which is no small task.
Not at all. And our source material for this is just a fascinating stack of legislative architecture.
what are we looking at exactly?
So we're dissecting the Republic of the Philippines Republic Act 9485,
Okay.
which is widely known as the Anti-Red Tape Act of 2007.
Got it. The 2007 Act.
Right. And we are pairing that with its incredibly granular 2008 implementing rules and regulations.
That's the IRR, right? Issued by the Civil Service Commission.
Exactly, the IRR. And finally, we'll explore how this initial blueprint fundamentally evolved about a decade later into the Ease of Doing Business Act of 2018.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to fix a broken machine, you first have to clearly identify its parts.
Right, you have to diagnose the disease.
Yeah, you have to understand the philosophy of why the machine is breaking down in the first place.
And the drafters of this law understood something really profound about the nature of delay.
What's that?
Well, the Declaration of Policy, at the very beginning of the Act, Section 2, it states that the goal is to promote integrity and accountability.
Which sounds like standard legal fluff, honestly.
It does. But they explicitly link those high-minded ideals to a highly practical goal, which is preventing graft and corruption by simplifying procedures and expediting transactions.
Oh, wow. So they made a direct legal correlation between the speed of a transaction and the actual integrity of the government.
Exactly. That is a crucial philosophical starting point. They're acknowledging that a slow, confusing process isn't just, an administrative annoyance.
It's the soil what corruption grows.
Precisely. If a process is fast and transparent, there's no leverage. Delay itself is the leverage.
That makes so much sense. I mean, if I can legally make you wait 6 months for a permit you need tomorrow just to feed your family, I have leverage over you.
And where there is leverage, there's the opportunity to extract a bribe.
Right. So by mandating speed, the state is actively destroying the leverage of corrupt officials. That's brilliant.
It really is. Building on that, the law has to define exactly where this leverage exists, right? It outlines its coverage in Section 3 and Rule 1.
So who does it actually apply to?
It applies to all government offices and agencies, including local government units, the LGUs, and government-owned or controlled corporations.
Okay, so a pretty wide net.
A very wide net.
Yeah.
But the critical condition is that it applies to these entities when they provide what the law terms frontline services.
Frontline services, which is exactly what it sounds like, I'm assuming.
Pretty much. Rule 2 defines it as the process or transaction between clients and government offices involving applications for any privilege, right? Permit, reward, license, or concession.
So it's the literal front line where the citizen meets the state.
Exactly. If you're a citizen asking the government for permission to do something or requesting a document they hold, that interaction is the front line.
Okay. And does it treat all those interactions the same?
What's fascinating here is that it doesn't. The law segments these frontline services into two distinct operational realities: simple transactions and complex transactions.
Okay, what's the difference?
Well, a simple transaction involves requests that only require ministerial actions from the public officer or which present only inconsequential issues.
Meaning it's basically a binary checklist.
Right.
Like, do you have the photograph? Check. Did you pay the filing fee? Check. Is the form signed? Check.
Exactly. There's no heavy cognitive load required from the government employee. The approval should be essentially automatic once the conditions are met.
Okay, so what makes something a complex transaction then?
A complex transaction necessitates the use of discretion in the resolution of complicated issues.
So it requires an officer to actually evaluate circumstances or weigh evidence.
Exactly. They have to make a judgment call or apply a nuanced policy to a specific situation.
That makes complete operational sense. You can't legally mandate the exact same processing time for a simple checklist as you do for a complex evaluation.
Right, so the architecture of the law separates them right from the outset.
But wait, looking at the coverage again, there is a massive exclusion here that I think we need to analyze.
You mean the exemptions?
Yeah. The law explicitly excludes those performing judicial, quasi-judicial, and legislative functions from all of these anti-red tape mandates.
That's right.
I mean, it's like a massive restaurant promising lightning-fast service in the drive-thru, but the kitchen management and the corporate office are playing by completely different rules.
That's an interesting way to look at it.
Why let the courts and the legislature off the hook? Why does this distinction matter for the average citizen just trying to get through the day?
Well, the restaurant analogy is helpful, but consider the fundamental nature of the product those different branches are actually delivering.
Okay, fair point.
The legislative branch is not delivering a standardized service, right?
Yeah.
It's engaged in deliberation. The entire point of a legislature is to debate, to hear multiple, often conflicting sides of an argument.
Right, to carefully consider the long-term impact of a new law.
Exactly. You definitely don't want to drive through legislature.
True. You don't want a politician pulling up to a window and saying, yeah, I'll take a massive national infrastructure bill with a side of penal code reform, and I need it in 5 minutes.
Exactly. Speed in the creation of law often leads to tyranny or just really catastrophic loopholes.
Okay, I see that. What about the courts, though?
The same logic applies to the judiciary. The primary function of a court is the dispensation of justice, not the delivery of a service.
And justice takes time.
Right. Justice requires due process, evidentiary hearings, the right to cross-examine witnesses, careful legal analysis.
So if a judge is forced to issue a ruling on a complex civil rights case within an arbitrary, say, 5-day window just to meet an anti-red tape quota,
the quality of justice would be severely compromised.
that makes sense.
So the law targets the executive branch and its administrative agencies because their job is execution and service delivery.
That's the arena where efficiency can actually be quantified and mandated without fundamentally breaking the institution. Okay, so the battlefield is clearly defined. It's the executive branch, specifically the frontline interaction points.
Right.
Now, if those frontline services are where the friction happens, the citizen needs to know exactly what the rules of engagement are before they even step up to the counter.
And this brings us to a mandate that is designed to completely obliterate what economists call information asymmetry.
Information asymmetry. That's the root of so much systemic abuse, isn't it?
It really is. It happens when one party in a transaction possesses far more knowledge than the other.
Think about taking your car to a mechanic when you know absolutely nothing about engines.
Exactly. The mechanic has all the information. If they tell you that you need a new catalytic converter, you have very little ability to argue.
You just have to trust them or pay them.
The exact same dynamic exists at a government counter. Historically, the person behind the glass knows the rules, they know the hidden memos, and they know the actual processing times.
And you, the citizen, do not.
Right. So if the clerk tells you that a permit actually takes 3 minutes instead of 1, or that the fee is suddenly double, or that you need 4 more obscure documents.
You are entirely at their mercy. You have no way to verify those claims.
So to shatter that asymmetry, the Anti-Red Tape Act mandates the creation of the Citizens Charter.
The Citizens Charter, this is Section 6 in Rule 4, right?
Yes. The law requires all government agencies to establish their service standards in the form of literal information billboards.
Billboards, not just a PDF buried on a website.
Exactly. And the phrasing in the implementing rules is highly specific. These cannot be hidden in a binder in a back office.
Where do they have to be?
They must be posted at the main entrance or at the most conspicuous place in the agency.
They want it front and center. It is an unavoidable public contract.
Exactly. When you walk into the building, the rules are staring you right in the face.
And the mandated content of these billboards is incredibly granular, isn't it?
Very. They must list their vision and mission, identify the specific frontline services offered, and state who the clientele is.
And from there, it becomes an exact blueprint of the transaction.
Right. The billboard must list the step-by-step procedure to obtain the service. It must list the specific officer or employee responsible for every single step.
Wow, they name names, or at least specific titles.
Specific titles or positions, yes. And it mandates the display of the maximum time it will take to conclude the process.
That's huge.
It is. Plus, the exact documents required from the client, the precise amount of fees, and the specific procedure for filing complaints if those standards aren't met.
And didn't I read that there are language requirements too?
Yes. To ensure accessibility, these charters must be published in English, Filipino, or the local dialect.
Let's just consider the psychological shift this creates. By forcing a government agency to post an oversized menu with exact times, costs, and steps.
It shifts the power dynamic entirely back to the citizen.
It arms the public with undeniable facts.
Exactly. If the billboard clearly states that a tricycle operating permit costs 500 pesos and requires 2 documents,
And the clerk asks for 1,000 pesos and a third document,
the citizen doesn't have to argue policy. They just have to point at the wall.
the wall becomes the authority, not the clerk. I love that.
The law essentially turns every citizen into an auditor. The government is deputizing the public to enforce its own rules.
Just by giving them the exact metrics against which the agency must be judged.
Right. And to ensure these billboards don't become faded, outdated relics that clerks can just wave away as old policy.
Right, because we've all seen those signs that look like they're from 1995.
Exactly. The implementing rules mandate that the agency must review and update the citizens' charter whenever necessary, but absolutely no less than once every 2 years.
That is strict. But you know what detail I find most brilliant in this section?
What's that?
It's this tiny definition buried in the preliminary rules. Rule 2, letter H. It defines something called irrelevant requirements.
Ah, yes. That is a phenomenal piece of legislative drafting.
It really is. The law defines an irrelevant requirement as any document or performance of an act not directly material to the resolution of the issues raised in the request.
And later in the text, it becomes a punishable offense to demand these.
Think about how massive that is. If you're applying for a permit to operate a small neighborhood bakery,
Okay, let's use that example.
and the clerk tells you they need a copy of your high school diploma, your voter registration, and your grandfather's birth certificate.
Which happens in bloated bureaucracies.
Right. But now you have a legal shield. The state is aggressively banning bureaucratic busywork.
If the document has no direct material bearing on the safe operation of a bakery, the government legally cannot ask you for it.
It's a direct assault on the culture of endless paperwork.
It is. But this reveals the next logical hurdle.
Which is?
Well, posting a billboard is a fantastic victory for transparency. Banning irrelevant documents is great.
Right.
But if the actual internal steps printed on that billboard are still fundamentally bloated, convoluted, and inefficient,
The citizen is still going to be waiting.
exactly. They will just know exactly how long they are going to be waiting. Transparency alone does not equal speed.
That is such a good point. You can have a perfectly transparent sign that says, this process will take 8 months.
And that isn't good service. It's just honest bad service.
Honest bad service. I like that. So how does the law force the bureaucracy to actually speed up the underlying machinery?
This requires a massive operational overhaul. The law tackles this by mandating what it calls the re-engineering of systems and procedures.
Re-engineering, how do they do that?
Agencies are legally required to regularly undertake time and motion studies.
Time and motion studies. Wait, like what they do in factories?
Exactly like factories. It's a fascinating application of industrial theory to public administration.
Because time and motion studies were pioneered in the early 20th century for manufacturing and assembly lines, right?
Right. You analyze an assembly line, measure exactly how many seconds it takes a worker to tighten a specific bolt.
You analyze their physical movements.
And you figure out how to shave off half a second to maximize output.
But how do you apply manufacturing metrics to a cognitive task? It makes sense for building a car, but how does an agency do a time and motion study on reviewing a legal application?
It requires breaking down cognitive and administrative tasks into their physical reality.
Give me an example.
Well, an evaluator has to physically receive a folder. How far is their desk from the intake window?
Oh, I see.
The evaluator has to verify a tax number. Does that require walking to a different floor to check a physical ledger, or is it a database query?
And if it's a query, how many keystrokes does it take?
Exactly. If an approval requires a supervisor's signature, does the document sit in an inbox for 3 days, waiting for the supervisor to physically return from the field?
Or is there an electronic routing system?
Right. By legally forcing agencies to conduct these studies, the government is demanding that its departments treat paperwork like an F1 assembly line.
They have to map the physical and temporal movement of documents to hunt down bottlenecks.
And once they identify those bottlenecks and re-engineer the flow, the law drops the hammer regarding timelines.
The actual deadlines.
Yes. The implementing rules establish a hard ceiling for public service.
What are the ceilings?
Applications must be acted upon within the period prescribed in the agency's citizens' charter, but under no circumstances can that period exceed 5 working days for simple transactions
5 days.
and 10 working days for complex transactions.
5 and 10 days. For national bureaucratic processes, those are incredibly aggressive targets.
Very aggressive.
Yeah.
But the drafters knew that simply shouting "go faster" wouldn't work if the system was still structurally designed to be slow.
Right. You can't just tell a broken car to win a race.
Exactly. So they introduced a mechanism to physically prevent the stalling of documents. It is arguably the most radical operational shift in the entire text.
Oh, I know what you're going to say. We can call it the rule of 5.
The signature cap. Rule 3, Section 3. The text explicitly mandates that government offices and agencies rendering frontline services shall limit the number of signatories to a maximum of 5 signatures.
5 signatures of officers or employees directly supervising the evaluation, approval, or disapproval of the request.
No process can require more than 5 signatures, period.
I mean, anyone who has ever worked in a large corporation or tried to route a contract through a complex organization feels the visceral relief of that rule.
Oh, absolutely.
In a bloated system, a document goes to a manager, then it routes to a director, then it goes to the legal department, then to finance.
Then back to a VP for final sign-off.
Exactly. You can sit on someone's desk for 2 weeks simply because they are attending a conference in another city.
But in the context of government regulation, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the 5-signature limit isn't just an efficiency hack.
What is it then?
It is a profound anti-extortion mechanism. In a corrupt bureaucracy, every required signature is a potential toll gate.
A toll gate. Let's expand on that. A toll gate in this context is a choke point where a transaction can basically be held hostage.
Exactly. If your business permit requires 15 different signatures from 15 different mid-level managers across various departments,
That equates to 15 different individuals who possess the unilateral power to stall your life.
and corrupt actors understand this leverage perfectly. They know you have a grand opening plan.
They know you're paying rent on an empty storefront.
So the folder mysteriously sits at the bottom of their inbox until a facilitation fee is quietly offered to motivate them to, pick up their pen.
Wow. So by legally capping the required signatures at 5, the state is radically limiting the surface area for extortion.
They are dismantling the toll gates by law.
That is incredible. And they ruthlessly anticipated the classic "I'm not at my desk" excuse, too.
They really did.
The law lays out strict, unyielding rules for the chain of command to prevent a document from stalling just because someone took a sick day.
Right. If the regular signatory is absent, the official next in rank automatically becomes the signatory.
And if there are multiple people next in rank?
The agency is legally required to prescribe an order of priority beforehand.
And what if there is literally no one next in rank?
The head of the agency must designate an officer in charge. There is zero tolerance for a transaction grinding to a halt because of a vacation schedule.
The machine is mandated to keep moving.
It showcases a remarkable level of operational foresight. They looked at every common excuse for bureaucratic delay and systematically outlawed them.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, though. Because creating a perfect system on paper ignores one massive variable.
Which is?
What happens when the deadline just passes?
Oh, yes.
Like what happens on day 6 of a 5-day transaction? This is where the law introduces Section 9, automatic extension of permits and licenses. The text states that if a government office fails to act on an application for the renewal of a license or permit within the prescribed period, that permit or license is automatically extended until a decision is rendered.
This completely inverts the traditional burden of delay.
Exactly. Usually if the government is slow, the citizen suffers.
Your license expires, you can't drive, or you have to shut down your business while you wait for them to process the paperwork.
But this rule shifts the consequence of delay entirely onto the government. Your permit simply remains valid.
It's a powerful protection for the citizen.
It is, but I have to push back on this because structurally, this sounds terrifying.
Terrifying how?
Let's think about the real-world implications of automatic extensions. What if the permit in question involves serious risk?
Okay, give me a scenario.
Let's say it's an annual safety inspection certificate for a chemical manufacturing plant,
Ooh, okay.
or a structural integrity permit for a high-rise construction crane. If the government is understaffed or backlogged, and they miss the 5-day window to review the safety reports, does this chemical plant just get an automatic, legally binding free pass to keep operating without a safety check?
I see where you're going with this.
Isn't that a massive loophole that could lead to a public disaster?
That is the exact hazard, and it is why the drafters included a vital, specific exception.
Okay, what's the exception?
In that very same section, the law explicitly states that the automatic extension shall not apply when the permit, license, or authority covers activities which pose a danger to public health, public safety, public morals, or to public policy.
Oh, thank goodness.
And it specifically highlights natural resource extraction activities as an example.
Like mining.
Exactly. They recognize the limit of their own efficiency mandate.
They had to.
They recognize that while speed is paramount for standard business licenses or basic administrative certifications, you cannot sacrifice public safety on the altar of anti-red tape quotas.
Right, so if a commercial mining operation applies to renew a permit,
And the Environmental Protection Agency needs more time to review a complex ecological impact study.
the mining company does not get an automatic green light to keep blasting the mountainside just because a 5-day deadline expired.
The exception acts as a circuit breaker, protecting the public from the unintended, potentially catastrophic consequences of forced efficiency.
Okay, so the administrative plumbing is re-engineered, the timelines are set, the signatures are capped, and the safety exceptions are carved out.
The structure is sound.
But ultimately, this system isn't run by algorithms, it is run by human beings.
And human beings are complicated.
Very. They get tired, they get hungry, and sometimes they get greedy.
Or opportunists outside the system see the lines and decide to game the system.
Exactly. So how does the law regulate human nature?
This is where the text transitions from structural engineering to intense behavioral modification. Let's look at the rules regarding working schedules in Rule 6, Section 3.
This addresses the scenario I painted in the very first minute of our deep dive.
The closed window at noon.
The lunch break excuse.
The law aggressively targets this. It mandates that heads of offices must ensure that all clients who are within their premises prior to the end of official working hours are attended to and served.
Even during lunch break.
It explicitly says even during lunch break and after regular working hours.
They actually encode the phrase even during lunch break into national law. Think about what a profound victory that is for the working class.
It's massive.
If you are a day laborer who can only afford to take an hour off work to visit a government office, and you manage to grab a queue ticket at 4:59 p.m.,
They legally cannot shut off the lights and kick you out at 5 p.m.
they are legally obligated to stay and process your transaction.
To make this operational, the rules tell agencies to adopt mechanisms like rotation systems among personnel,
Sliding flexi-time reliever system.
or providing skeletal personnel during lunch and snack times.
The law even suggests that offices may consider providing frontline services as early as 7 p.m. in the morning until as late as 7 p.m. in the evening.
The entire physical staffing model must be hyper-focused on continuous, uninterrupted customer service.
They even mandate public assistance desks that must be staffed at all times.
And they require special lanes for pregnant women, senior citizens, and persons with disabilities.
But, managing the employees inside the building is only half the battle.
Because of the ecosystem outside.
Exactly. Bureaucratic friction inevitably spawns an entirely separate parasitic ecosystem outside the building.
You're talking about the fixers.
I'm talking about the fixers, the shadow economy.
The concept of the fixer is deeply embedded in the culture of red tape globally.
How does the Anti-Red Tape Act actually define a fixer?
In Section 12 and Rule 2, it defines a fixer as any individual, whether officially involved in the operation of the government office or not, who has access to people working therein.
And who facilitates the speedy completion of transactions for pecuniary gain or any other advantage.
We all know the archetype, right?
Oh yeah, it's the person loitering in the parking lot or near the entrance who notices you looking frustrated at a long line.
They approach you and whisper, "Listen, that line is going to take 4 hours.
But if you give me 1,000 pesos, I know a guy inside. I can get your paper stamped and brought out to you in 15 minutes.
Fixers exist because the system is hostile. They are a market response to government inefficiency.
But they don't just solve the problem, they actively perpetuate it.
Right. Fixers often collude with the insiders to intentionally slow down the regular lines.
So they basically manufacture the frustration.
Exactly, ensuring that citizens become desperate enough to pay the fixer's fee.
It is a literal extortion ring. And the law takes this incredibly seriously, doesn't it?
It establishes severe criminal liability for fixers. We aren't just talking about a slap on the wrist here.
What are the penalties?
They can face imprisonment not exceeding 6 years.
6 years in prison for fixing.
Or a massive fine ranging from 20,000 to 200,000 pesos, or both. The state is criminalizing the shadow economy.
And the penalties for the government employees who enable this or who just fail to meet the new service standards, those are equally severe.
Yes. Rule 8 categorizes the offenses. Let's look at what they consider light offenses.
Okay.
These include refusing to accept an application if the requirements are actually met.
Or failing to act on an application within the prescribed period.
Or, and this ties back to our earlier point, failure to attend to clients who are within the premises prior to the end of official working hours and during lunch break.
So taking a lunch break while the lobby is full of people is legally classified as a punishable offense.
It is. And the penalty for a first-time light offense is a 30-day suspension without pay.
Wow. Plus mandatory attendance in a values orientation program.
I want to focus on that values orientation program. This is a fascinating mechanism.
Why is that?
The Civil Service Commission and the Office of the Ombudsman are mandated to promulgate this program, which explicitly includes anti-red tape and anti-fixing workshops.
What does it mean to legally mandate moral re-education for a bureaucratic error?
It's an interesting question.
It treats bad service not just as an administrative failure, but as a moral failing against the citizen.
Yes, it implies that the employee has lost touch with the fundamental concept of public service and needs to be reminded who they actually work for.
It's an ideological correction.
Exactly. And if the ideological correction fails, the escalation is swift.
What happens next?
A second light offense results in a 3-month suspension without pay.
And the third?
A third offense results in dismissal and perpetual disqualification from public service.
3 strikes, and you are permanently banned from ever working for the government again.
Now, what if an employee is caught actively colluding with outsiders for economic gain?
I'm guessing that's not a light offense.
That skips the light offense category entirely. That is classified as a grave offense.
And the penalty.
The penalty for a first offense is immediate dismissal and perpetual disqualification from public service.
It is a 1-strike policy.
The state has calculated that the risk of keeping a demonstrably corrupt official within the ecosystem far outweighs any consideration of tenure or civil service protection.
Having draconian penalties on paper is a strong deterrent.
True.
But any criminologist will tell you that harsh penalties are useless without an effective mechanism for discovery.
Exactly. The real challenge of fighting entrenched corruption is that both parties in the transaction, the fixer and the corrupt official, have a massive vested interest in keeping quiet.
And the victim, the citizen, often just wants their permit and doesn't want to risk retaliation by filing a formal complaint.
So, how does the government actually monitor compliance? How do they gather data on a shadow economy designed to be invisible?
You need data, and you need insiders to talk.
Which leads us to the twin engines of enforcement in this law, the report card survey and the whistleblower shield.
Let's start with the report card survey. This is Section 10, right?
Yes. The law mandates that all offices providing frontline services are subjected to this survey, initiated by the Civil Service Commission in coordination with the Development Academy of the Philippines.
Okay, so this is not a passive suggestion box sitting dusty in the corner of a lobby.
Not at all. This is an active, statistically sound evaluation tool.
They are aggressively surveying the public to generate a quantitative measure of actual user perception.
They evaluate client satisfaction and operational efficiency. But the most powerful part of this survey is that the law explicitly states it shall be used to obtain information and estimates of hidden costs incurred by clients.
Hidden costs. They are systematically asking citizens, did you have to pay a bribe? Did you use a fixer?
Yes.
But how do you safely survey a citizen about illegal bribes without the corrupt officials finding out and retaliating against that citizen?
By utilizing independent bodies, the Civil Service Commission and the Development Academy, they bypass the local agency's chain of command entirely.
So the data is anonymized and aggregated.
Exactly. The goal isn't necessarily to catch one specific clerk taking a 500 peso bribe on a Tuesday.
It's to identify systemic vulnerabilities.
Right. If an agency reports that their processing time is 2 days, but the report card survey reveals that 40% of applicants had to pay a hidden cost to achieve that 2-day turnaround.
The national government immediately knows where to focus its investigative resources.
Furthermore, the results of these surveys are published.
Oh, wow.
It introduces public shaming or public praise based on hard comparative data.
That's powerful. But survey data, as you said, only points you to the systemic problem.
To actually dismantle and prosecute a corrupt network, you need hard evidence. You need testimony.
And corrupt networks survive on a strict code of silence.
This is where Section 15 of the Act, detailing the rules for immunity, becomes arguably the most aggressive weapon in the entire legal framework.
The whistleblower shield.
The law stipulates that any public official or employee who is charged alongside others in a corruption case and who voluntarily gives information or willingly testifies shall be exempt from prosecution in that specific case.
The investigating body can grant this immunity upon application.
Yes,
On the surface, that just sounds like standard plea bargaining.
it does.
But this raises an important question because we need to explore how this immunity is actually granted. It can't just be a free pass for anyone.
Right. What stops the mastermind of a massive fixing ring like the department head, who is raking in millions, from just turning in his low-level runners to save himself when the heat gets too high?
Exactly. The drafters anticipated that exact vulnerability. The granting of immunity is far from automatic.
The implementing rules list 5 incredibly strict conditions that must all be met before someone can be discharged as a state witness. Let's analyze the mechanics of these conditions.
Okay, what's the first one?
First, there must be an absolute necessity for the testimony. Second, there must be no other direct evidence available for the proper prosecution of the offense, except the testimony of that specific respondent.
So if the investigators already have you on a hidden camera accepting the cash, you have nothing of value to trade.
Exactly. They don't need your testimony, so you don't get immunity.
You only get the shield if you are the key to unlocking the rest of the conspiracy.
Correct. Third, the testimony can be substantially corroborated in its material points.
So you can't just invent a story about your boss to save your own skin.
There has to be a paper trail or circumstantial evidence that aligns with your narrative.
That makes sense. What's the fourth?
Fourth, the respondent cannot have been previously convicted of a crime involving moral turpitude. The state requires a witness with at least a shred of credibility in front of a judge.
And the fifth condition?
The fifth condition is the kill switch for the mastermind. It states, said respondent or accused informant does not appear to be the most guilty.
That is brilliant.
It really is.
Let's really analyze the psychological pressure this specific condition puts on a corrupt network.
The state is legally weaponizing the prisoner's dilemma, but they are altering the rules to maximize paranoia.
Okay, let's break that down. In a classic prisoner's dilemma, 2 conspirators are separated in interrogation rooms.
While the one who stays silent goes to prison.
It relies on self-interest overriding mutual trust.
But by adding the rule that only the person who is not the most guilty can get the deal, the state is injecting a highly targeted poison into the hierarchy of a corrupt enterprise.
Imagine you are a mid-level manager running a fixing syndicate.
Okay.
You rely on 3 low-level clerks to actually delay the documents and funnel the desperate citizens to your fixers outside.
Those clerks are taking immense risks for a small cut of the profit.
And under this law, those clerks possess something incredibly dangerous, a legally guaranteed escape hatch.
Because the clerks know they are not the mastermind.
They are not the most guilty.
Therefore, they are perfectly positioned to claim immunity if they flip on you, the manager.
The mastermind knows that every single underling they bring into the conspiracy is a loaded gun pointed directly at them.
The state isn't just investigating corruption. It is actively destabilizing the fundamental trust required to run a criminal enterprise.
It creates an environment of perpetual suffocating paranoia for the corrupt actors. I mean, that is a masterclass in psychological legislative drafting.
It really is. Now, we have spent a lot of time analyzing the theory, the structural engineering, and the behavioral modifications of this law.
But theory is abstract.
Exactly. To truly understand the impact and the limitations of the 2007 Anti-Red Tape Act, we need to look at how this plays out in the physical reality of a government office.
To bring this all to life, Annex B of the 2008, Implementing Rules and Regulations, provides a literal minute-by-minute case study.
It is an excerpt from a real model citizens charter from a local government unit,
detailing the exact process for the granting of new and renewal of existing business permits at the city administrator's office.
Right. It sets the stage by providing the location, the contact numbers, and identifying the clientele, citizens doing business or planning to do business within the city.
And then it makes a bold promise aligned with the new legal standards. It says, if requirements are complete, this transaction can normally be completed in 1 working day.
1 working day to get a business permit. That sounds like an absolute triumph of efficiency.
But then you look at the fine print. You look at the requirements section.
Yes.
And this is where the cold reality of bureaucratic legacy hits you. To unlock that lightning-fast 1-day processing, you first have to gather 13 different requirements.
13 distinct clearances from 13 different entities.
The sheer volume of prerequisite documentation is staggering. Let's unpack what a citizen actually has to acquire before they even walk into this specific office.
It's a journey.
First, you need a tax clearance from the city treasurer's office, proving you don't owe back taxes.
Okay, that makes sense.
Then, an environmental permit from the city environment and natural resources office.
Getting more complicated.
Then a barangay clearance, which is a local neighborhood level approval. Then you need a clearance from the DTI, the Department of Trade and Industry.
Register your business name nationally.
Right. You need an SSS clearance, proving you are registered with the National Social Security System to pay employee benefits. You need a BIR clearance from the Bureau of Internal Revenue, their equivalent of the IRS, proving you are registered to pay national taxes.
And you need a PhilHealth clearance for the National Health Insurance Program.
And depending on the physical nature of your business, the list continues to grow.
You need an annual safety inspection from the city engineer's office to prove your building won't collapse.
A certificate of fire safety inspection from the Bureau of Fire Protection.
A zoning clearance from city planning to prove your business type is allowed in that neighborhood.
If you are selling food, you need a food handler certificate from the health office.
And finally, you need the duly accomplished and notarized application form itself.
Gathering those 13 clearances is a Herculean task. It involves traveling to different buildings across the city, waiting in 13 different lines,
Paying 13 different sets of fees.
and hoping that not a single one of those secondary offices experiences a delay. It could take weeks or months of full-time effort just to assemble the prerequisite folder.
But for the sake of the case study, let's assume the citizen has survived the gauntlet.
They clutch the magical folder containing all 13 documents, and they walk into the city administrator's office.
This annex provides the time and motion breakdown of what happens next. It tracks the transaction with the precision of a stopwatch.
It reads like a Formula One pit stop. Let's go through it.
Step 1. The applicant proceeds to the office. The designated employees, listed as employees A, B, C, or D, provide a short briefing on the service, check the requirements, and make clarificatory inquiries.
The mandated duration for this step, exactly 10 minutes.
Step 2. The client submits the application. The office receives and reviews it.
Duration, 3 minutes.
Then, employees E, F, or G type the information onto the official permit form.
Duration, 5 minutes.
Step 3. The office releases a copy of the permit to the applicant and instructs them to go pay the final processing fee.
Duration, 5 minutes.
Step 4. The client physically walks to the city treasurer's office to pay the fee. The revenue collector issues the official receipt.
Duration, 5 minutes.
Step 5. The client then walks to the Bureau of Fire Protection desk to pay their specific fire fee. The BFP person in charge issues that receipt.
Duration, 5 minutes.
Step 6. The client returns to the administrator's office and presents the receipts. Employees C or H receive the documents, segregate the file copies, record the data in the logbook, and release the client's copy.
Duration, 5 minutes.
And finally, step 7. The complete vetted document is presented to the executive level for signature. The city administrator approves and signs the permit.
The mandated duration for this final executive review and signature, 3 minutes.
Total processing time, roughly 41 minutes.
Think about the level of micromanagement this represents. The state is legally binding its workforce to 3-minute and 5-minute intervals.
If an employee takes 8 minutes to type the form instead of 5, they are technically failing a mandated service standard.
Which, as we discussed, can eventually lead to suspension.
It is an intense, high-pressure environment for the civil servant, entirely geared toward eliminating wait times for the public.
This case study perfectly illustrates the profound duality of the 2007 Anti-Red Tape Act.
On one side of the coin, the internal processing at this specific desk is a masterpiece of efficiency. The time and motion studies worked.
They took a potentially bloated process, broke it down into discrete, measurable actions, capped the signatures, and engineered a 41-minute assembly line.
That is a massive victory for the citizens standing at that specific counter.
But on the other side of the coin, the existence of the 13 preliminary requirements reveals a glaring systemic flaw.
The clerk at the final desk might be operating with the speed of an F1 pit crew.
But the citizens still had to navigate a horrific, months-long obstacle course just to get their car into the pit lane.
The 2007 Act successfully regulated the frontline interaction, but it did not aggressively attack the back-end bloat.
It made the final step incredibly fast, but it didn't reduce the number of steps required to reach the finale.
And that realization that you can't just mandate speed without fundamentally reducing the sheer volume of regulation brings us to the final section of our Jeep dive, the evolution of the law.
To understand where this goes next, we look at our final source document, Republic Act number 11032. Passed by the 17th Congress roughly a decade later, around 2017 or 2018.
The title of this new act is the key to understanding the paradigm shift.
What's the title?
It is an act promoting ease of doing business and efficient delivery of government services, amending for the purpose Republic Act number 9485 otherwise known as the Anti-Red Tape Act of 2007.
So what does this all mean? The shift from anti-red tape to ease of doing business?
It's not just a rebranding exercise. It represents a fundamental philosophical evolution in how the state views its role in the economy.
While our source text primarily shows the structural scaffolding of these amendments, indicating which sections were deleted, inserted, or heavily modified, the sheer volume of changes tells a story.
They inserted almost 24 entirely new sections. They completely overhauled the penalty structures. They essentially knocked down the walls of the 2007 House and built a massive new wing.
The 2007 Act was essentially punitive and defensive, right?
It was about disciplining bad behavior. It was focused on stopping corrupt clerks, banning lunch breaks, and outlawing fixers.
It viewed the bureaucracy as a misbehaving child that needed strict rules and harsh punishments to function properly.
But by 2018, the global economic reality had shifted. Nations do not operate in a vacuum. They compete globally for capital, investment, and entrepreneurial talent.
If a multinational corporation is deciding where to build a new manufacturing hub, or if a local entrepreneur is deciding whether to start a tech company, they look at the bureaucratic friction.
If it takes 6 months and 13 separate agency clearances to open a business in your country, but it takes 2 days online in a neighboring country,
The capital will flow away from you. Bureaucracy isn't just annoying, it is actively anti-competitive. It destroys economic growth.
precisely. The ease of doing business framework moves the government from a defensive posture to a proactive, incentivizing posture.
It acknowledges that punishing a slow clerk isn't enough. You have to redesign the system so the clerk has less complicated work to do in the first place.
It targets those 13 requirements. It moves toward integrating systems, creating unified online portals, and forcing different government agencies to talk to each other so the citizen doesn't have to act as a physical courier between them.
The evolution suggests that the ultimate cure for red tape isn't just forcing the bureaucracy to move faster, it is making the bureaucracy smaller and less intrusive to begin with.
We have spent the last hour dissecting the anatomy of a bureaucratic revolution.
We started with the universal, deeply human frustration of staring at a closed window at noon, and we explored how a nation attempted to legally mandate a cure for that powerlessness.
We examined the architecture of the 2007 Anti-Red Tape Act. We saw how it tackled information asymmetry by forcing agencies to post literal billboards of transparency, the Citizens Charter arming the public with exact costs and timelines.
We looked at the mechanics of re-engineering, forcing cognitive tasks to be measured by industrial time and motion studies.
We analyzed the brilliance of the Rule of Five, recognizing that every required signature is a potential toll gate for extortion, and destroying those toll gates by legally capping the approval chain.
We explored how the law managed the human element, outlawing the lunch break excuse to protect working-class citizens, and aggressively criminalizing the shadow economy of fixers.
We saw how the state hunted for hidden costs through the report card survey, and how it weaponized the prisoner's dilemma, granting whistleblower immunity to underlings to inject paralyzing paranoia into corrupt networks.
And finally, we tracked the evolution of this foundation into the Ease of Doing Business Act, shifting the state from merely punishing slow behavior to actively designing a pro-growth ecosystem.
It is a testament to the reality that fighting bureaucratic bloat is not a single battle, but a continuous evolving war of system architecture.
The scale of the effort is incredible. They systematically hunted down the friction points in their own government and tried to legally hack them.
And I think there is a profound takeaway here that extends far beyond the realm of government permits and tax clearances.
There absolutely is. We've just analyzed how a massive national government used signature caps, mandatory transparency, and time and motion studies to force its own bloated machinery to serve the public faster.
I want you to turn that lens on your own life. Think about your corporate environment, your daily workflow, or the complex systems you navigate every day.
Think about the endless email chains, the meetings to plan meetings, and the redundant approval processes that slow down your best work.
If an entire nation can legally mandate that no task, no matter how complex, requires more than 5 signatures, what artificial red tape are you putting up with?
What bureaucratic busy work in your own life could be eliminated tomorrow if you implemented a personal rule of 5? Where are the hidden toll gates in your own organization, and how can you dismantle them?
It's definitely something to think about.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the architecture of efficiency. Demand clarity, question the irrelevant requirements, and never accept the lunch break excuse. We'll see you on the next deep dive.
Welcome to the debate. Today we're asking a foundational question about government. Does forcing strict time limits on bureaucrats actually speed up the system, or does it just create a complex illusion of efficiency?
Right. It's a really fascinating tension between what looks good on paper and what actually happens on the ground.
Exactly. I mean, think about a modern factory assembly line. There's a certain mechanical beauty to it, right? Every station is timed almost to the second. A chassis rolls in, an arm attaches a door, a laser welds a seam. It's completely predictable. And we tend to measure the efficiency of that entire factory by how quickly the finished car rolls off that final belt.
We do, but, measuring only that final assembly completely ignores what it took to actually mine the ore, forge the steel, and navigate the whole fragmented supply chain just to get those raw parts onto the factory floor in the first place.
Which is a massive undertaking.
Right. You're measuring the final act of production, but completely ignoring the actual burden of preparation.
Yes. And when you step into the world of public administration, and really bureaucratic reform in general, we are looking at that exact same tension. Today, we are examining Republic Act No. 9485.
Also widely known as the Anti-Red Tape Act of 2007.
Right, along with its implementing rules and regulations. This is a pivotal Philippine law. It was designed to fundamentally overhaul how the government delivers services to the public with this dual goal of improving efficiency and preventing graft.
And the central question we are exploring today is whether this act effectively solves that bureaucratic inefficiency through its very strict procedural mandates. Or, and this is my position, if it merely creates an illusion of efficiency.
An illusion?
Yeah, does it focus almost entirely on the final stage of a government transaction while completely ignoring the labyrinth of underlying requirements a citizen has to navigate before they even reach the counter?
Well, I will be arguing that the law's rigid procedural constraints force real, measurable accountability, specifically its radical transparency mechanisms like the mandatory citizens charter and the strict processing timelines.
Okay, but at what cost?
At the cost of the bureaucrat's unchecked power. By deliberately stripping away the discretionary power of the individual public servant, the act attacks the very root of frontline corruption. It fundamentally changes the power dynamic between the state and the citizen.
And I will be contending that the law defines efficiency in a highly selective way, a way that quite frankly artificially flatters the bureaucracy while maintaining a crushing administrative burden on the public.
You think it just masks the real problem?
Exactly. It focuses on superficial frontline metrics, and that ultimately masks the staggering number of prerequisite clearances required before the government's official processing clock even begins to tick.
Well, let's lay out our positions clearly. When you read the underlying policy mandate of this act, the goal is straightforward. It's to establish effective practices to prevent graft by promoting radical, unavoidable transparency.
Sure, transparency is the stated goal.
And it achieves it. I view this law as a structural triumph, primarily because of the Citizens Charter. This isn't just, a best practice suggestion. It is a rigid legal requirement for every single government agency providing frontline services.
Right. They have to put up the billboard.
Yes, they must publicly post an information billboard at their main entrance, and that billboard cannot be vague. It must detail the exact step-by-step procedures, the absolute maximum processing times, the specific documents required, and, crucially, the exact down-to-the-centavo fees. Furthermore, the law dictates hard legal deadlines. Frontline services must be acted upon in no longer than 5 working days for simple transactions and 10 working days for complex ones. It also legally limits the maximum number of required signatures on any document to just 5.
Which sounds great in a vacuum.
But to understand why this matters, you have to understand the sociology of the bureaucracy before this act. A citizen walking into a government office was entirely at the mercy of the clerk behind the desk. Rules were unwritten, fees were fluid,
And delays were weaponized. Yes.
Exactly. Delays were weaponized to extract bribes. By quantifying and publishing the exact parameters of every service, the Anti-Red Tape Act removes the shadows where corruption thrives. It standardizes expectations.
I hear you, but I come at it from a different way. I agree that secrecy breeds corruption, and daylight is generally a good thing, but codified complexity is still complexity.
How so?
The fatal flaw of the Anti-Red Tape Act is that it redefines efficiency as merely the speed of the final transaction. Consider the sample citizens charter provided right in the law's implementing rules and regulations.
The one for the business permit?
Yes, exactly. The charter proudly promises a processing time of 1 working day. To anyone walking by that billboard, that sounds like an incredible bureaucratic victory. A single day to get a business permit?
It is a victory, compared to how it used to be.
But when you read the fine print, the text explicitly states this rapid turnaround applies only if all requirements are complete.
Well, obviously.
But what actually constitutes a complete application? The sample charter lists 13 separate clearances a citizen must secure beforehand. We're talking about an environmental permit from the local natural resources office, a tax clearance from the Internal Revenue Bureau, a clearance from the Department of Trade.
Right, health insurance clearances, Social Security.
Exactly. An annual safety inspection certificate, a zoning clearance, a fire safety inspection certificate, and the list goes on. A citizen might spend 6 months navigating these distinct siloed agencies.
Okay, but
Let me just finish this thought. The law accelerates the final rubber stamp at the city administrator's office, but it entirely ignores the maze required to reach that desk. Therefore, the act creates a sophisticated facade of speed. It allows the local government to claim compliance and efficiency while leaving the deepest systemic inefficiencies untouched. I mean, none of these departments talk to each other.
I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective. You're criticizing the law for not solving a problem it wasn't immediately designed to solve.
It's the Anti-Red Tape Act. Red tape is the problem.
But the billboard itself, the published charter, is a revolutionary tool for citizen empowerment. Let's look closer at the mechanics of that very same sample charter for the business permit. It doesn't just say 1 day, it breaks down that day into granular, legally enforceable metrics.
Right, the minute-by-minute breakdown.
Yes. Step 1, a briefing on the application. Duration exactly 10 minutes. Step 2, receive and review documents. Duration 3 minutes. Step 3, typing information 5 minutes. Later, issuing the official receipt 5 minutes.
And you think that level of micromanagement works?
I think this level of legally binding granularity is unprecedented in public administration. Think about how a bribe is actually extracted. It's extracted in the gray areas. It's extracted when a clerk says, I need to review this, come back tomorrow.
True.
But if the law states the review takes exactly 3 minutes and the clerk takes an hour, they are in direct violation of a published statute. You cannot understate the psychological shift this causes in a bureaucracy. It changes the dynamic from a citizen begging a powerful official for a favor to a citizen holding the government to a published, legally enforceable contract.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that the psychological shift works entirely in the citizen's favor. Let me tell you why. That granular timing, the 3 minutes here, the 5 minutes there, is exactly the illusion I'm talking about.
how is a legally binding time frame an illusion?
Because it looks fantastic on a billboard. But consider the behavioral incentives it creates for the government workers themselves. When we look at the disciplinary mechanisms in the rules, a government worker commits a formal offense if they fail to act on an application within the prescribed period.
Right, with strict penalties.
Exactly. The penalty is a 30-day suspension without pay for the first offense, and outright dismissal for the third. That is terrifying for a public servant. However, under that exact same rule, they are protected from penalty if the failure to act is due to a lack of requirements.
Which is entirely logical. You cannot logically or legally process a fundamentally incomplete application. If a builder doesn't submit a structural blueprint, the city engineer cannot approve the building permit.
Logical, yes, but highly perverse in practice. It incentivizes agencies to pile on external prerequisites to protect their own internal compliance metrics.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Right? If I am a department head and I am terrified of being suspended without pay because my staff took 6 days instead of 5 on a transaction, my best defense mechanism is to require 13 separate complex clearances from other departments before I even allow the citizen to submit the application to my office.
So you're saying they outsource the friction?
Exactly. The official processing clock doesn't start until I deem the application complete. So the Act actually encourages agencies to outsource that friction. It creates a hypersensitivity to frontline deadlines at the direct cost of aggregate systemic efficiency. The citizen is still carrying the exact same burden. It's just been cleverly shifted off the agency's official stopwatch.
That's an interesting point, though. I would frame it differently. I think the behavioral incentive actually drives systemic improvement over time. And I like to think of this through an analogy.
Okay, let's hear it.
It's like baking. You cannot blame the oven for the time it takes the chef to gather the ingredients.
Ah, okay.
The government office receiving the final application is the oven. Prior to the Anti-Red Tape Act, you could bring fully prepared, perfectly measured ingredients to the oven, and the oven might simply refuse to turn on unless you slip the chef some cash.
Fair point.
Or it might take 3 weeks to bake a 20-minute cake because the chef was waiting for a supervisor's signature. What the Act does is ensure that once the ingredients are prepped, the oven works predictably, transparently, and reliably every single time.
Assuming the oven isn't broken.
But it fixes a massive historical point of failure. The law isn't just demanding speed at the counter. It mandates the re-engineering of systems and procedures. It requires agencies to conduct actual time and motion studies. It forces the bureaucracy to actually study and streamline their workflows, rather than just guessing how long things take.
But your oven analogy assumes all those ingredients are easily available at a single well-stocked grocery store. In this bureaucratic reality, the ingredients are other government permits.
Well, yes, civic duties can be complex.
But the baker has to go to 13 different ovens just to get the ingredients for the final oven. And worse, the third oven won't give you the flour until you prove you visited the first oven for the sugar. It's a sequential nightmare.
I think you're overstating the difficulty of gathering standard permits.
Am I? And furthermore, even when the ingredients are completed, the law provides the government with a massive escape hatch that undermines all that predictability. Consider the provision for the automatic extension of permits and licenses.
Section 9.
Yes, the law states that if an agency fails to act on a renewal within the prescribed period, the permit is automatically extended. On the surface, that sounds like a brilliant citizen-centric protection.
It is a brilliant protection. It completely removes the leverage of delay. If the government drags its feet and fails to process a renewal, the citizen's business isn't forced to shut down. The permit simply continues.
Right.
Meaning the bureaucrat can no longer hold the citizen's livelihood hostage to extort a bribe.
Except for the loophole built right into the very same sentence. The automatic extension explicitly does not apply when the permit covers activities which pose a danger to public health, public safety, public morals, or to public policy.
Well, there have to be safeguards for dangerous operations.
But that wording is spectacularly broad. What business doesn't touch public safety or public policy in some tangential way? A restaurant touches public health. A construction firm touches public safety. A media company touches public morals.
That's quite a stretch.
Is it? Almost any agency could theoretically claim an exception under this proviso. By invoking public policy, they retain their discretionary power to delay applications indefinitely, without ever triggering the automatic extension, entirely defeating the purpose of the strict timelines.
I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning because you are assuming the system operates entirely on self-policing, which it explicitly does not.
Okay, then who polices it?
The architects of this law understood human nature. They anticipated that agencies might try to game the system, or artificially inflate their requirements, or abuse those broad definitions of public safety you just mentioned. That is precisely why the independent audit mechanism is there.
You mean the report card survey?
Yes, Section 10. It is so crucial to the law's success. The law does not just trust agencies to report their own success or justify their own delays. It mandates an external, independent evaluation by the Civil Service Commission in coordination with the Development Academy of the Philippines.
Right, the DAP.
And they are tasked with actively initiating surveys to obtain feedback on how the Citizens Charter is actually being followed in practice.
But how does a survey actually stop a corrupt department head?
I mean,
A survey is essentially just a feedback form. Does it have teeth, or is it just more paperwork?
oh, it has massive teeth. This isn't a suggestion box in the lobby. The evaluation tool is legally linked to the critical performance evaluation of the office and its personnel. But more importantly, let's look at how it extracts that feedback.
Okay.
The law explicitly states the survey shall be used to obtain information on hidden costs incurred by clients to access frontline services, which may include but is not limited to bribes and payment to fixers.
Ah, the hidden costs.
Right. The auditors don't just ask the agency head if they are doing a good job, they go directly to the transacting public. If the published Citizens Charter says a permit costs 500 pesos, but the independent survey reveals that the average citizen is spending 2,000 pesos to get it done, the audit instantly flags that 1,500 peso discrepancy as a systemic hidden cost. They are actively hunting for the exact friction and extortion you are describing. If an agency is abusing the public safety exception to delay permits, the report card survey is designed to catch the glaring discrepancy between the published billboard and the lived reality of the transacting public.
And what happens to those results?
These results are publicized and incorporated into the agency's official annual report. You simply cannot hide systemic extortion when there is an independent audit of the actual users.
That's a compelling argument regarding the audit mechanism, I'll admit. But have you considered that the law's framing of the fixer problem itself reveals a fundamental misunderstanding of the disease?
Misunderstanding? How?
Well, the Act creates strict criminal liability for fixers, imprisonment of up to 6 years, and massive financial fines. It treats the fixer as a parasite, attacking a healthy system.
Because they are.
But I would argue that fixers only exist because the systemic burden is completely intolerable. A fixer is a rational market response to an administrative failure.
A rational market response. They're running an illegal service.
But think about why. When a citizen needs a tax clearance, a zoning permit, a fire safety certificate, an environmental clearance, all of which might require lining up at 4 a.m. at 4 different municipal buildings on opposite sides of the city, paying a fixer becomes a rational economic choice.
For someone who can afford it, maybe.
Right, for a small business owner whose time is inherently valuable. The fixer isn't the root problem. The 13 unintegrated databases are the problem.
I have to push back strongly there. The fixer isn't just some passive, helpful beneficiary of a slow system. Fixers are almost always in active collusion with the corrupt officials inside the building.
I'm not denying there's collusion.
They are the bagmen. They act as the buffer so the public official doesn't have to take the bribe directly. By criminalizing the fixer with severe penalties, you sever the vital conduit of that corruption. And furthermore, the Act addresses the internal bottlenecks directly to eliminate the need for fixers in the first place.
By mandating alternates, right?
Exactly. What makes this intervention so critical is how it surgically dismantles the oldest excuse in the bureaucratic playbook. The law mandates the designation of alternate signatories. It prescribes an exact order of priority if the main official is absent. If the department head is out, the next in rank automatically becomes the signatory. We all know the classic scenario, right? The boss is out attending a seminar. Come back next week.
Which is essentially code for pay me a premium to expedite this.
Yes. By legally mandating an alternate, the Act destroys the manufactured scarcity of signatures that fixers rely on to sell the services.
Look, I agree that prosecuting fixers who collude with officials and mandating alternate signatories are necessary steps to clean up the physical frontline. I am certainly not defending the extortion tactics of fixers.
I'm glad we agree on that.
But criminalizing them still attacks the symptom, not the underlying pathology. Let's examine the immunity clause provided in the Act, Section 15.
Okay.
It states that any person charged who voluntarily gives information or testifies against their co-conspirators can be exempt from prosecution. This is a classic legal tool used to dismantle criminal syndicates, right? Where you flip a low-level participant to catch the boss.
Very standard practice, yes.
But look at what the inclusion of this tool implies about the drafter's mindset. It implies that the core problem of red tape is entirely transactional corruption. A bad actor intentionally holding a document hostage for cash.
Which happens constantly.
While that absolutely happens, the much larger, far more insidious problem is structural. It is the sociology of siloed government data. Why does a citizen have to act as a physical courier between the tax department and the zoning department?
Because systems take time to modernize.
Either out of a desire to hoard jurisdictional power or just due to a lack of technological infrastructure. You can execute every fixer in the city. You can ensure the boss is always at their desk to sign the paper. But if a citizen still has to physically carry 13 pieces of paper across town to prove to the government what the government technically already knows, you haven't solved red tape.
You're asking for a technological miracle that simply wasn't feasible for every municipality in 2007.
I'm saying you've just made the maze legally compliant.
But if we follow that logic, we ignore the reality of how systemic change actually happens. Establishing a baseline of radical transparency is the absolutely required first step for any of the structural reform you're asking for.
I don't disagree with that.
You cannot streamline a system that you cannot clearly see. By forcing these fragmented agencies to physically publish their specific requirements on a billboard in the Citizens Charter, the Anti-Red Tape Act dragged the bureaucratic maze out into the sunlight for the very first time.
Which, yes, is a good thing.
Before this, the complexity was hidden in filing cabinets and unwritten rules. Once it was published, policymakers and citizens could look at the billboard and say, wait a minute, why are we requiring a sanitary permit for a software consulting business? That makes no sense.
Fair point.
You have to map the labyrinth before you can start bulldozing the walls. Furthermore, the hard limits on processing times and a looming threat of the independent audits create a pressure cooker environment. That pressure forces interagency cooperation.
Eventually. Maybe.
That's precisely why the Act takes the time to carefully define simple versus complex transactions. It recognizes that some regulatory functions genuinely require technical discretion and time. But by drawing a hard legal line, 10 days maximum for complex issues, it forces the bureaucracy to define its own operational limits and, crucially, be held strictly accountable to them.
I can see that bringing the rules into the sunlight is a vital prerequisite for change. You are right that mapping the maze is step one, but the lingering danger of the Anti-Red Tape Act of 2007 is that it allowed the government to declare victory far too early.
I think it was a massive victory.
By slapping a one-day processing sticker on the final step of a multi-month journey, it provided tremendous political cover without actually requiring the hard, expensive, structural integration of those back-end databases. It optimized the service counter to look incredibly efficient, but it entirely ignored the chaos happening in the kitchen.
Well, as we bring this discussion to a close, let's summarize where we stand on the source material. I maintain that the Anti-Red Tape Act of 2007 is a vital, structurally sound intervention that fundamentally shifted the landscape of public service.
By weaponizing transparency through the mandatory Citizens Charter, imposing strict, legally enforceable time limits, drastically limiting required signatures, and utilizing independent citizen-driven audits like the report card survey to hunt for hidden costs, the Act forces real bureaucratic accountability. It successfully strips away the shadows and the procedural ambiguity where petty corruption has historically thrived.
And I maintain that by starting the official processing clock only after all external prerequisites are met, the law creates a highly sophisticated facade of speed.
Facade.
Yes. While it certainly cleans up the immediate frontline interaction and standardizes expectations, it leaves the deepest systemic inefficiencies, the crushing, overlapping clearance requirements across uncommunicative departments entirely untouched. Ultimately, it forces citizens to navigate a codified, well-lit maze just to reach the starting line of the transaction.
We do find significant convergence on a few key points today, though. We both agree that establishing a baseline of transparency, forcing the bureaucracy to make its rules public, permanent, and visible is an absolutely necessary first step in any reform effort.
Absolutely.
We also firmly agree that independent measurement tools like the report card survey are critical, because self-policing within any bureaucracy is inherently flawed and prone to self-preservation.
Indeed, evaluating public policy requires us to look far beyond the immediate, highly visible interaction at the frontline counter. The true measure of the ease of doing business does not lie simply in the metric speed of the final transaction, but in the cumulative weight of the entire civic journey.
Beautifully put.
I highly recommend our listeners dive into the source material themselves to explore the precise legal definitions of complex versus simple transactions and see just how much interpretive wiggle room agencies are really given when classifying their own services.
It brings us right back to where we started, looking at that modern factory assembly line. A perfectly timed, beautifully predictable assembly line is a marvel of engineering and a worthy goal for any government office.
It is.
But as we've explored today, that final speed ultimately means very little to the consumer if it takes a lifetime just to gather the parts. Thank you for joining us.